Now, this man was born and raised in West Virginia. He's lived in North Florida for over 20 years. He has a master's degree in English Lit, and he's also a doctor of occupational therapy. Because the man needed to pay the bills. Because, you know, English Lit. I mean, for real. He had a Jazz Fest epiphany back in 2012. And he fell in love with all things New Orleans. Actually, he had a Jazz Fest epiphany in his early 20s. And in 2012, he decided to have one last proper, serious go at being freelance writer. And he decided to pack everything up and head off to New Orleans for a year. And so, ladies and gentlemen, Deja Vieux? Reborn on the Bayou, again, Eric Sarrett.
As 2012 dawned, I was emotionally flatlined. I'd failed to become the hillbilly Hemingway, felt stagnant at work, and had just escaped a rocky 7-month relationship that left me as drained as Granny's dirty dishwater. I was pushing 40 and completely untethered. But in my mid-20s, I felt born again upon first visiting New Orleans. So friends who had witnessed me explode in Technicolor at Mardi Gras 2011 dragged me back to Jazz Fest that May in hopes of resuscitation. And one day, I'm possibly clinically depressed. The next, I'm waving my shirt overhead, second lining to Dirty Dozen Brass Band. So when Kevin Griffin of Better Than Ezra said to the crowd, "I know what you're thinking," and the answer is yes, you can easily move to New Orleans and make this shit happen, I was like, is he talking to me? As I drove back, an idea formed. I'd quit my job in return, spending a year living like a local and blogging about my attempts to join a Mardi Gras crew. I'd arrived Mardi Gras 2013 as spectator and ride 2014 as a participant. I even had a catchy title, My Year of Mardi Gras. So next February I arrived with no job or home for Better Than Ezra's Crew of Raucous event, which included private concerts, parade viewings, and fan fellowship. And from there, I danced across the city, chatting up strangers, and documenting every aspect of Mardi Gras for the blog. I also landed an article about Raucous in Offbeat magazine, which led to a cover story on emerging jazz and R&B songstress Robin Barnes. We met at April's French Quarter Fest, where I eagerly sought out fresh acts to feature on the blog, linking to short clips on YouTube. I also networked with local authors and soaked up all the jazz and funk I could afford in local clubs, but never Bourbon Street, which locals avoid like low-fat salad dressing. I also devoured blogs and podcasts about blogging, futilely chasing sponsors and traffic-boosting algorithms. Traffic I needed, because apparently the reviews I submitted for that May for Jazz Fest were too fangirl enthusiastic for hipster offbeat. But Jazz Fest had been my gateway drug to New Orleans with its regional food vendors and mix of uber-talented locals with international superstars. I mean, it's where I want to go when I die. For years, I religiously attended one weekend, but by volunteering at the accessibility booth, I was able to do them both and for free, while learning not all artists necessarily appreciate being bootlegged on YouTube. Who knew? But perhaps what I loved most was the weirdness. For example, that summer, a friend, suggesting that I blog the Red Dress Run for charity, paused, looked me up and down, and said, "Never mind, you'll never find a red dress your size this late in the season." Then there were the weekly bike rides where we dress in costume and yell "Happy Thursday" to passers-by because, you know, Thursday. I also regularly hosted friends and musicians for Red Beans on Monday, per local tradition. Despite being a white boy from West Virginia, they raved about my beans and my gumbo. I never told them the secret was the rosemary from the cemetery at the end of the block. Hey, fresh herbs are expensive, people. Yet I was often homesick, and New Orleans isn't an easy place to live. But posts about ever weirder roommates or imploding expectations gained the most traction. Locals said they'd heard enough idealized hype about old NOLA. They enjoyed seeing the reality knock me on the ass like their famous potholes, and that was a real local news competition. But that fall, I joined Chewbacca's, a DIY science fiction themed marching crew, meeting regularly with sub-crew crap, crew of really awesome parodies, to make our own really classy throws. But traditional crews with fancy manufactured floats are quite insular, so every attempt to connect was met with stonewalled disdain. And then, out of the blue, the head of crew of Morpheus reached out. He had read my blog. They were looking to grow and thought my year of Mardi Gras would be good publicity. So that February, I achieved my goal of rolling down St. Charles Avenue, throwing beads and cheap toys to frenzied spectators. A week after, I'd marched in Chewbacca's as Lieutenant Ooh the Hora in the red dress I'd found in my size on Amazon. But despite my successes, I failed to generate enough interest or revenue to continue. So after a final adventure, blogging on my way from the Mississippi source in Minnesota back to its Crescent City gateway, the sun set on my year of Mardi Gras. And upon returning, friends invited me to this new storytelling event called PechaKucha, but when they suggested I share, I declined. It wasn't a failure, I was proud of the experience, but just petered out. My story had no ending, and life moved on. In 2016, I met Amy at the inaugural Sing Out Loud and introduced her to Mardi Gras in 2017. Afterwards, her 10-year-old innocently sharing a Tux Blue Balls throw in her show and tell. Oops. But we swore we'd return, never seeing the 3 Ps coming. In 2018, I started a PhD. In 2019, I became a parent to Savannah after surprise and rocky pregnancy. And in 2020, we chose to observe a pandemic for all who celebrate. By 2025, as another attempt to return appeared doomed, I quietly accepted that New Orleans may just be done with me. But somehow we made it, despite spending our first evening in an urgent care. But on February 28th, Savannah lined St. Charles Avenue where she waved and yelled like a pro. And grabbing her first beat from the air, she spun and said, "Look, Daddy, they threw me something!" And in that moment, the circle felt complete. I might not have become the Faulkner of Fat Tuesday, but as Savannah played and preened with her treasures in the neutral ground, I realized that New Orleans was in fact not done with the Sarrett family, that the parades will roll and the show will go on.